Welcome again. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for another sharing session organized by the Business Innovations Generator. Thank you so much for taking the time off today to join me, Frank, Yusry, and my incubation team in sharing a bit more about tech hiring and outsourcing. Prior to starting, I would like to share a bit more about what we are in case you're not one of our incubatees. So bear with me for just 3 minutes before I pass you on to Frank and Yusry. The BIG Incubation Program is a 4-month program for entrepreneurs. We're actually still accepting applications for our next batch. So if you're interested, please apply. Applications end on 31st of August. A little bit more about us. It's a 4-month equity-free program designed to help startups validate their solution and scale. We hold 3 batches a year, about between 8 to 20 startups per batch, industry agnostic. Most of our startup founders are from the pre-seed to seed stage, open to both public and SMU students, and our acceptance rate is about 16% so far. These are some of our startups that have raised or exited in the last 12 months. If you'd just like to have a look at them, we are a very founder-centric program, and we look for 4 main criteria: coachability, integrity, grit, and community orientation. And if you feel there's all 4 of these qualities and are interested to start a company or are working on a company, please do join us. We provide a comprehensive support infrastructure of knowledge, monetary support, and non-monetary support. Today's session, for example, the sharing session is part of our knowledge series, where we work with different entrepreneurs or different specialists or experts to bring you best practices from the startup scene. We also have strong regional connectivity. So if you want to expand in future into different areas, we do have connections with different incubators or universities around Asia. We definitely have an iconic downtown location at the greenhouse. So hopefully we're opening up soon again, but this would be the place where it would be the nexus of all entrepreneurial activities in SMU and hopefully in the city. We have an experienced high-touch incubation team. So I head the incubation program together with my team. And we also have a whole list, a mix of good entrepreneur residents and CXO in residences that could help give you advice. This is the brief application process. You apply, you go through 2 rounds of interviews, and you'll review the intake. And this is the key evaluation criteria. So as I said, cultural fit is really important. And after, if you pass the first round, we go on to about competitive criteria. So please apply to us if you're interested and you have access to more series like this. We don't only hold sharing sessions, we also hold master classes as well as office hours with different people. I think that's it. And let me introduce to you today's speaker. So this is Frank from TechJDI, and he's here to talk a bit more about tech development for startups. And together with him, he has his colleague Yusry, who's going to start off the session talking more about the topic. So let me hand you guys over to our experts, and I hope you enjoy the session today. Yusry, it's all for you.
Yep. So I will start off with presentation regarding the technical aspect of things. So let me just set my slides to full screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so
if you have any questions, please write them down in the chat, and then after the 2 sessions, we will have a Q&A where you can ask your questions specifically to Frank and Yusry.
Yep. Okay, so I'll be talking about technology development for startups. This is a very short introduction of myself. I'm the technical principal at TechJDI. I'm also a technical mentor at SMU IIE BIG. Also a technical advisor for a few local startups. Most recently, I was CDO of a local startup called Get Fulfilled. I'm now awaiting my next adventure, which I hope will be coming in the next month or so. So previously, I've served in various software engineering roles in local startups and SMEs. My main go-to software stack is Ruby on Rails, React, and React Native. Secondary software stack would be Python, Falcon or Flask, and SQL Alchemy. And I enjoy building libraries and tools as side projects. And when I say libraries, it will refer to software libraries. Okay, so as I've mentioned earlier, I will be talking about technology development for startups. And here are some of the assumptions that I've made in this particular presentation. You are an early stage startup, just starting out, probably with minimal seed funding or no seed funding at all. You're currently just founders with low to little employees, and most likely no experienced technical person in the team. If the above don't apply to you, the general concepts are still applicable, but specifics may change. So feel free to ask questions at the end of the presentation or through email, which I will share at the end of the slides. Okay, so in any startup, what you want is, generally speaking, when it comes to software development, I split them into 3 stages. You may have heard of these terms, POC, proof of concept, prototype, and MVP, which means minimum viable product. So what I'm doing right now is to explain the definition. This is not exactly an industry standard. It varies with different people, but generally speaking, if this is how I see what it means by proof of concept. So this is basically to test a concept. So you have an idea, you want to validate the assumptions of users, product, and algorithms. In this particular stage, you actually ignore every user interface or user experience issues. You just focus on the technicality of your idea. So given data in, what is the data out? Does it make sense? It does not need to be a technical proof of concept. It could be an observation of processes. It could even be pen and paper forms. So as you carry out all these steps, you realize whether your idea actually makes sense or you need to reevaluate things. Then the next stage, once you have collected sufficient information that tells you that your concept works, your concept is usable by the people you are targeting or your potential users, you may want to start on building what I would call a prototype. Generally speaking, I divide the process of prototyping into 2 parts. The first part is what I call the UI UX prototype. This is to develop how data is collected. So it's the inputs and how you would present the outputs. So if your idea is maybe like an automated reporting system, so your data in could be all the raw information and the output is the raw data. So it is how you present your user interface to collect the raw information and subsequently present your output. It does not need to be working, but it should provide your stakeholders with some idea of what they'll be using, okay? And yeah, so, and after that, you probably might be working on a working prototype. So at this stage, what it actually means is that once you have your UI UX developed, you will be building something that kind of works. It may not be used by many people, but it's to validate that whatever you've collected in the proof of concept stage still applies once you have developed the UI UX. So say, for example, in your proof of concept stage, you need, say, the students' marks. And in the UI UX prototype, you may have like a method to enter all the students' marks. So does it still work based on what you have understood in proof of concept and what you have developed in the UI UX prototype stage? So once you have built sufficiently, spend some time building your prototype and you realize that, yeah, I've tested it with 1 or 2 potential customers and it seems like we are getting the hang of it and things seem to be going well. So the next stage is building your minimum viable product. To me and to many of my counterparts, a minimum viable product is basically your version 1 of the product. So in most cases, when you're still in the startup form, you'll not be building your MVP yet. You'll be working on your POC, figuring things out, possibly building a prototype, testing it with a few potential customers. And then when you are done with that, you build your version 1 of the product. So what this means is that you will implement the least number of features, focus on the most important features, yet your product is still viable. It means you have the features that people want, and not just people want, but you can attract a large number of people to use these features, because this is what many people want. Anything else that people may want, or they say, okay, this is a useful thing, should be moved to the next version or next release. You should not be focusing on these kind of features at these very early stage. And how do you identify your viable feature set? So as I mentioned, the most important thing is based on the reach. Next is that you should also consider your preliminary business or monetization plan to give you some sort of rudimentary form of cost-benefit ratio to figure out, to prioritize which features would keep your product viable as you start your journey. So what I've covered so far would be the definitions of, generally speaking, the 3 stages of software development in terms catered, I mean, the way that most startups would carry the process out. So you're at a stage where you're doing your prototype. Sorry, I think I skipped a slide. Yes, proof of concept. So you might be wondering, how long does building a proof of concept take? To be honest, it is a variable timeline. You, as the source of the idea or the identifier of the problem, would be the best judge of it. If you have run your concepts with multiple potential users and they all or mostly come back negative, then this particular concept is not viable. You should stop there, review, and decide if you need a new concept. And if you want to test your concept out with multiple people, it would be great if you actually do the testing in parallel so that you get more information for the next stage. And what kind of resources do you need for this particular stage? To be honest, it's mostly just yourself, and of course your co-founders if they are not in this session. You may want to get someone who's technically an expert, a technical expert. But to be honest, this is something that you may not really need at this stage, but it would be good to have, because it allows you to ensure that on top of problem solving, you are gathering sufficient technical knowledge regarding your concept. It's not just technical knowledge, but technical feasibility. So to see whether, yeah, you're carrying out this concept, you're testing something out, but if it seems like it's too difficult to implement it, maybe it's not the right time to work on this particular concept. The main takeaway from this process is that you should have your concept documented, your processes, the steps, so that, say, someone else who is not very familiar with the process, if they were to read your documentation, they should be able to carry out your concept without your intervention. if everything is still in your head, not properly written down, then it's possible that you may have not developed the concept sufficiently. Next is the prototype stage. So in this case, I'm referring to the initial UI UX prototype. Generally speaking, I would keep the prototyping timeline to about 2 months at most. And this would include obtaining user feedback. What do you need at this stage? You definitely need a UI UX designer, and you require your potential users to run by the prototype. So is to get their opinion, to see whether it, it, it is likely to help them improve their processes, or is it going to be a waste of time for them? And the main takeaway is that the UI UX designer understands what you want to do, what your concept is all about. If you can't, if you are not able to properly share your concept with the designer, it probably means that you need to revisit your POC because something is not very clear. And the next takeaway is that you have a good prototype of what you are going to be developing, and you and your potential users are happy with how it has turned out. It's not going to be perfect, but you should see signs of positivity. Okay, so after you've done your design, your UI UX design and things like that, you may want to consider building what I can call a working prototype. Similarly to the UI UX design stage, you want to keep this to at most 2 months. You need to keep your UI UX designer to reconcile any technical requirements. What this means is that, say, the developer figures out that to implement a particular design or experience is going to take a significant amount of his time. So he may want to be able to discuss with your original UI UX designer to figure out whether there are alternative designs to make things simpler. And similarly, you want to have your users around so that they can test it out with, in this case, actual working data. Main takeaway is that the developer understands your POC very well, similar to your UI UX designer. The real life data that gathered during this particular phase continues to work and validates what you have discovered in your POC. So there should not be significant changes between your processes as you carry them out during the POC stage and the prototyping stage. And many people do confuse this step with developing an MVP because many people will build the MVP and do their testing during that period. But to me, I consider this distinct because MVP is like your version 1. So by the time you are done with your MVP, you are basically ready to start some sort of marketing, getting more people on board. Real life is basically your version 1 of the system. Okay, so we've covered what your takeaway is when you're doing the prototype stage. So is it time to build your MVP yet? To be honest, no. This is actually the perfect time for you to take a breather and make sure you have got everything all ready before you proceed to build your version 1 of your system. To me, one of the most important things is that have you got a long-term experienced technical expert or advisor on board? It's important to have someone, a technical expert on board with your startup who is on a long-term basis. It does not need to be a full-time advisor. It could be a part-time advisor of sorts. The most important thing is that they have an understanding of how you have been doing your technical implementation. And so in case you are changing your outsourcing partner, or you're moving your development teams to a different country, or starting a new team from scratch, they'll be around to guide you. But ideally, it should be your co-founder or your very first technical hire. Next is funding and monetization plans. This is not very technical, but how much money or how much funding you have is very important to help you decide what to build. In a very early stage startup, development is your number one cost because you need to build something to show your customers to obtain a buy-in. If you have nothing to show your customers, you probably won't have any paying customers coming on board. Next is clear business requirements for development. It's important to document what your product is all about. So in the POC stage and the prototype stage, you should have your requirements documented, written down, and this particular requirement will be a living document. Things may change and it should continue to be updated. So, and in an ideal case, it should get better each passing day. And when it comes to choosing a software stack, I understand most of you may not be technically inclined or technical expert, but generally, this is my very general advice. Don't use some technology that's brand new or very little, or showing little signs of little use. Use something well supported. For example, lots of recent development or lots of likes and stars on the GitHub pages. Also, it's important to note that more popular software stacks means a wider availability of talents. So if you use something very exoteric or something not used, not widely used, you will have difficulty finding talents when you're building your technical team. And ideally, you want to avoid something that depends on a third-party service to function. But in most cases, this is commonly used by gaming apps. So if you're not building a gaming app, most likely this does not quite apply to you. Okay, so now that you've taken a breather, it's time to build your minimum viable product. Generally speaking, I would set aside 3 to 6 months on average, with a maximum of 3 developers, a UI UX designer, and a long-term technical expert who could be one of your developers if you have decided to have a long-term technical hire. And for most startups, anything beyond 18 man-months or 6 calendar months just means that you are targeting too many features or trying to achieve too much in your MVP. You should look at reprioritizing your feature set and get things down to 18 man-months or 6 calendar months or less. Always be ready to start selling or marketing your product at the beginning of the last third of development. And the most important thing to note is that your MVP is your production system. It's the one that you're launching with. In an early stage startup, it's very important to get this right because it's basically going to be your lifeline. Unless you're very lucky and you've managed to get a large 6-7 digit seed round. Yeah. Okay. So I've compressed a lot. So I'm pretty sure that many of you might have some questions. So feel free to contact me at yusry.harfordin@techjdi.com. I've conveniently placed a QR code, so if you scan it in the next few seconds, you can add me as a contact. And as I've mentioned earlier, I'm also a IIE big BIG technical mentor. So if you'd like me to come on board, speak to your advisor, and maybe they'll be able to place me with your startup. Yeah, okay, so that's it from me. I'll be handing over the screen to my colleague, Frank.
Frank, you're on mute.
Okay, am I on mute now? Good. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, good. Thanks, Yusry, for the going through the technical part of the development for startups. So now on my piece itself, you cannot run away from human resource. You always need your talents, your technical talents, when you are going on to your journey of developing your MVP and onwards itself. So today I'll just share more about how what kind of things you need to watch out for human resource, and how basically you can go about doing that. The things important for setting up your team. A bit of background. Basically, TechJDI, we are going into Vietnam. So for the past 4 years, we've been helping a lot of startups to build their teams in Vietnam. We do human resource recruitment, freelancers, even incorporation, business development, and helping them to fundraise for their Series A and Series B. We have a network of investors as well as the talents in Singapore, Vietnam. So we started this because a lot of startups in Singapore, including my TNF portfolio companies. But in Singapore, I'm also an investor. We invest in the tech companies. So they all face the problem of having no talents in Singapore. Rather, they're all being in the bigger companies. So the only way out was for me to set up an offshoring center where all my startups can use the same facilities to grow their teams. Some of the companies we have helped are over here. I wouldn't touch them. This is not a sales session. I'll just skip this part over here. So there's quite a few different models that you can go in when you are setting up your teams. It can be in-house, it can be outsourced, it can be freelance, it can be offshore. So all of these have their advantage and disadvantage. So I'm going to touch on these overviews about the different operational model and how should you set up your team structure, and also more about your salaries. How do you budget for salaries? Basically, salaries is not just take home pay. There's a lot of other things to consider. I also compare with you between Vietnam and Singapore. That's something that I've experienced with for the past 4 years. So we know what's the cost differences on two sides itself. And also some of the success factors if you are going to be going into offshore teams. So operational model, frankly speaking, at the very early stage, it should be in-house as much as possible. It should be in-house because at the early stage of startup, everything is changing. Your business, your prototypes are always changing. Your requirements are always changing. Sometimes you think this is what the customer wants, but once you test it, they say, no, this is something like what you want, but not exactly what you want. So that may cause a change in your scopes, etc. For that, you need something flexible, something in-house, so that you have the same team sitting in together to be able to adapt to flexibility. So yes, at the early stage, the best model is really in-house at the initial stage. But the problem is for a lot of startups that I talk to, they don't have the tech co-founder. Without the good tech co-founder, how do you then go about doing your development for the MVP itself, right? So in that case, then they have to look overseas to get developers on board. They may get a good technical advisor, but then the technical advisor may not be 100% with the team to grow. So what we get from a lot from the very early stage is that they are looking for either tech co-founders, which frankly speaking, I can't really help because tech founders, they're quite rare in Singapore. So what we help them to do is basically get to the next part of getting outsourcing partners as well as freelance partners over in other countries where the cost is significantly cheaper. Right, but of course it's not the best case because it is still cheaper, it is still better if it's in Singapore next to you. So if you do not have that experienced tech co-founder, so what a lot of companies do is that they outsource it to overseas to develop the MVP. It is good at that stage, and I would also suggest it for very early stage seed and angel companies. Basically the development is on scope basis. So Yusry just now shared about coming up with the technical specifications. So with the specs over there, it can be sent out. You can use the specs to get outsourcing firms. So it is short term very cost effective because the team is already there. It's already assembled. Once you choose the right one with the same tech stacks as what is required for you, it would be useful and you can kickstart to hit your 3 to 6 months development. But the thing is that they all go according to the specifications you give to them. So, and as startups, we always change. The functions always change. It can be even 80% change of what you think it is. So if it change, what does that mean? If you find a very enterprise cost sourcing firm, they would have already agreed on the functional spec, and everything else that you want to change is considered a change request. So they may extend the timeline, extend the scope, extend the price, and even may need to overhaul the system simply because of the changes. So you got to be prepared for that. Yeah, and so that's the inflexible part of things. Sometimes you can also get freelancers because at the early stage you don't need a big team, 2-3 person. So engaging freelancer is viable at the NGSC stage. You choose this model when you're unable to commit the full-time team, the permanent team. It's cost effective, but what you need is somebody strong on your side with an experienced product manager or CTO to manage the freelancers, to tell them exactly what to do. It's unreliable for the long run, it's unscalable for the long term because they are freelancers. What does that mean? It means that they are taking on not just your projects, but even other projects. Sometimes there may be, they may deprioritize your project, or they may find that, oh, they don't want to do freelance anymore. You want to join a bigger company. Then you lose your talents, right? But it's a give and take. It's cost effective, but it's just not a long-term solution. So for a lot of other companies at a later stage, once they'll try to do outsourcing and freelancing at the start. At a certain point of time, when they have proven some traction of their product or raise a next round, what they will try to do is to set up their own team. So and that's where a lot of our we help in. We set up the team for them. We hire for them to build up their initial team with a senior tech leadership over there, and so that they can. And so this team is full time, 100% working for the company, working for the startup. It is more expensive than outsourcing, definitely, because there's a time to build up. There's the recruitment phase, and there's try to onboard the people so that they can work for you the long term. It is long-term cost effective simply because they are with you. You don't really pay the outsourcing company to project manage for you. You handle the project management for yourself, which I think makes more sense for startups. You have the ownership of the team, but you just hire more time and more cost at the start to build it up. So team structure at the start, at the very early MVP stage, you only need 1 to 3%. So at the point of time, if you're going to be offshoring, basically, who is your first hire that you're looking at? It can be anybody because all three are important that you're going to hire. So at this point of time, freelancing or outsourcing may work better for you. And you may not see any extra value in offshoring if you want to be your own team, simply because of all the administration and communications overhead to do that. Freelancing or outsourcing works better. You can straight away get it done, straight away get the team to do this project for you. Just that there's no long-term viability of it in the long run. So for the 3 to 5%, 5 to 10 packs, and 10 to 50 packs, these are more for later stage companies. As you grow the team, who is more important for you? If it's a 3 to 5 man team, your first hire in the offshore team needs to be a team lead of 4 to 6 years of experience. So you can back it out with a strong back end, and with another strong front end, and one back end engineer, one front end engineer, and mobile developer. These are some example structures that you can build a team according to, but it's not a rule of, it's a rule of thumb. It's not cast in stone. So it really depends on your startup, how your tech development milestones are, and who is strong or who is weak in the original team before you build this extra team. Later on, then you have to evolve. If you're going to be the 5 to 10 man pack, you need to have a TPM involved, a technical project manager who's able to manage like 2 different teams on 2 different modules for you. So we have seen such evolutions of stages going down this chain. When you are talking about offshoring to finding the tech developers, you also need to be worried that the take-home pay is not the total cost of ownership of any of the employee. So, for example, in Vietnam, this is what we see. The take-home may be 1,000. There is also a personal income tax component that is between 10 to 35%. There's also the employee side contribution, the gross salary, and everything. Laptop, office space, admin fees. This all adds up to be even significant, to be about 1.8 times of take-home pay. These are some of the considerations that at the early stage you may not take notice of, but it just builds up along the path. Of course, at the early stage you may decide like everybody will skip their employer contribution. You don't pay CPF. It's a pure I'll give you cash and help you do development. That still works. You may also get them to use their own laptop. Yeah, there's no office space. They work from home, etc. To bring down all these costs. But be prepared for all these costs to start scaling up once your team forms and go bigger. So these are some of the gross salaries that I see in Vietnam. IT Viet is one of the biggest tech job boards in Vietnam. The cost of developers are over here between like if you are looking for somebody senior, it's about 1,500 to 2,500 on USD basis. Most of the time, what we see is that the more popular hires are those mid-senior, between 2 to 4 years of experience. Yeah, they will draw about USD about 1,000 to 1,500, which is the same as what we see in the market. But of course, just now I mentioned there's a lot of built-up cost to that, the social insurance and the laptop, etc. So if it's this kind of salary, you need to beef it up. Be prepared for this total cost, monthly cost to be like 1.8 times of the salaries, right? So most of what we see people are looking for is number one, UI UX. They may engage somebody on a part-time basis. So that's another issue. How do you get somebody on a part-time basis? You would have to be a freelance role or a contract role out there. You can't hire somebody to work full-time for you, but only at half the rate to do that. So what we see is that web developers, yes, you may hire in on a contract basis to be doing 100% for you. UI UX definitely needs to be a freelance basis. All the others is also maybe the business analyst, any support QA. They're not so important at the early stage. But you will need to consider this as you build out your team overseas. Okay, so budgeting wise, over the past 4 years, we have been active in Vietnam. So we see that the price in Vietnam is increasing. And that has been, what we see now is about 47% of Singapore price. Assuming this is an apple to apple comparison. Singapore price is around here. Let's say you want to hire a 6 years experienced person. His basic salary will be 5,005 Sing. This we get from manpower statistics. Right. So all in all, if you add in his CPF, then we're not even counting his overheads of the admin income that you need to have. We're talking about office space, it may be about 83,000. And after you add up all the performance bonus, if you're going to give performance bonus, it may be 120K for somebody of 6 years of experience. But that's also budgeting a lot of the medical benefits that you may have. If you take out all this, yeah, 83K is sort of like the thing that you need to look out for. But in Vietnam itself, if you hire somebody on the EP, well, you save on the CPF part, but most of the things still are required. So you get a bit of savings if you hire EP simply because of the CPF that you don't pay for them. Whereas if you hire in Vietnam itself, what you see is that the cost and salary is about half. And even though the CPF is slightly higher, the overheads included in is only about 56%. But after you add everything in, it's even like lower than what you compare with Singapore, like about 47%. Frankly speaking, it has gone up over the years. 4 years ago, it was about 35 to 40% of Singapore price. Vietnam has increased their costs over the time simply because it's a global demand. You are going to hit these numbers everywhere. If you go to Indonesia, so we also have Indonesian clients from Jakarta coming over, and I was quite surprised about setting up their operations in Vietnam. So from that we find out, yes, it's a global crunch. Even in Indonesia, Philippines, they're all going up. So where are the places that you can get affordable talents? Frankly speaking, that's a hard question to answer. We are seeing some people going into Cambodia, Myanmar side, and also even Africa side, Sri Lanka side to get developers. What we also see is that Eastern Europe is also a good market. Their cost is comparable, a bit higher, good technical skill sets. They mainly serve the European market. Singapore side, we don't see that much, also because of the hours. The timing hours is different. So some success factors when you talk about offshore team, you will need to set up your communication channel better. So communication is always the biggest issue because of number one, time zone difference, number two, you cannot meet in person. But recently we've been getting a lot more inquiries because of COVID-19. they are thinking that since there's COVID-19, everybody's at home. So what does it matter whether the person is in Singapore, Indonesia, or Vietnam? Right. So that has sort of broken down the barrier to do that. And everybody needs to focus on getting their communication stack up using Slack, Trello, WhatsApp, Viber, Telegram, WeChat, Skype, Zoom, Jira, all of these kind of things to make sure your communication is fit. Have discussions verbally just to bounce things off, and then follow up with emails to cover all your points. It's also important when you have an offshore team to share information about what's happening in your Singapore site. So when you're doing offshoring, having an offshore team, having information is important, because if you do not send information, a lot of times they will start to guess what's happening, and then that will lead to a high resignation rate, especially for startups, because they know when you join a startup, they already know that startup is not stable. It may be gone in 2 or 3 months once the funding runs out, right? So with that kind of mindset, once we start to withhold information, then they will start to panic more, and then we will see that the whole structure is unstable in over. Right. Engagement is important for offshore team. You need to share your mission to do that, to make sure. Right. Yeah, having cross-border interaction is important and sometimes useful. So what we see is that a lot of the teams, even for SMU itself, there's quite a few prior teams who travel to Vietnam to meet up with their team. And it's also helpful that SMU has a collaboration with UEH, University of Economic Opportunity, as a soft landing pad for SMU students. I encourage you to use that to go and expand and engage teams in Vietnam. Build rapport with them so that they feel that they belong to the same thing, not just outsourcing partners for that. So yeah, once if they are part of a team, you must make sure that everybody is know who is in the team and who to talk to. Because for remote team, if they don't know that, don't communicate much, it leads to a lot of communication breakdown. They don't know what to talk, who to talk to what. And in the end, it will go to a lot of frustration within the team. So, and also about when you grow the team, you need a strong leader in the overseas team to motivate the development team, and to also act as the communication bridge, simply because, again, of communication. The communication is very hard for everybody to talk to everybody. So a lot of time you will go through about the strong leader, the engineering lead, the tech lead, to solve issues and to bring to resolve issues, and then communicate about the technology development milestone. And when you are growing your team, remember they are not outsourcing vendors. They are not vendors that they also say that you must finish everything within this timeline as well. Simply because if they are your own team, what you want them to do is to do the best quality for your development. Whereas for outsourcing vendors, it is really trying to get the best pricing to get them, and to do that, a lot of times they will just cut corners and make things just work for you but not extendable. Whereas if you're talking about your own team, they are the ones, they know that in the long term they are the ones on the same platform and developing this platform. So they will sometimes give you recommendation and say, oh, why don't you do it this other way? It takes a bit longer, yeah, but it's more extendable in the future, right? At the same time, because you need to treat your remote teams like your own people. So your HR policy, your schemes need to be comparable to the Singapore side. So having global HR plan with local adaptation is important, so that you can fit for local culture, right? And having performance reviews is also important. You give them feedback, simply because communication is always an issue on both sides. Then for their growth, a lot of time for startups, because there's not much structure per se, it works just need to be done. So we may stop thinking about how will the career progression plan be like for your employees. When you hire a developer, a front-end developer, you only want to do the front end, right? But in his head, he's also thinking, okay, I'm doing front end now, but how can I progress in my career? So they may stick with you for the first year, but at the end of first year, they will start thinking, okay, how do I grow? But if if you haven't planned for them and you're just giving them more things to do, that's when they'll start thinking, okay, should I leave this company to join another company for my own growth? Because if you don't plan for their growth, they will plan for themselves. And that is why you see a lot of tech talents, they actually move from company to company so that they can, number one, have their pay jump, number two, for their career progression. If you are specific on Vietnam itself, yes, there's a lot of success culture factors. So I share some of them over here. The Vietnamese, they love to lunch together in the office. They need trust, they need time to build trust with each other. So having flying in and out to meet with them, to work with them, to have spend time playing with them is important. Some of the other things you need to face is like they have a face, they have a face, they focus on face. So you cannot criticize them directly too much. You can, of course, and when I say that direct criticism, it means in front of all the rest. But behind the scene, there can be things to tell them, how they can change. Blame avoidance is something that we also see. If shit hits the fan, it blows up. Well, it has hit the fan already, right? So what we need to do is to try to go and solve the problem instead of pointing fingers. You point finger at them, they will tell you, okay, well, it happened because of this and that. So no, don't need to go into that. The kind of squabbles. Just focus on what needs to be done and push it on. Right. Elders are respected in Vietnam, and seniority in the team is very strong. If you find somebody good in your team in Vietnam, they will be able to grow a team very nicely for you as you develop your business. But if you find somebody who is terrible, and he just is senior but not so good, it's going to be a problem for your team in the long run. Simply because they may stump all the junior junior members in the team who may actually be better. So flexibility is with them, practice flexibility with them, and you practice flexibility with you in their timeline. Right. I will say all these other things about stuff. Some other things to focus on is like having spent time with them in the community. They love to work together. They love soccer. They love their food. So showing appreciation for their culture is important. If you love beer, Vietnam has good beer. They are very good drinkers. Vietnam compared to Singapore are much better drinkers. Right. And you love coffee, there's coffee over there. Yeah. So this is what so sometimes I also as we are building, getting questions like Vietnam. How about Vietnam as a market? So it's not just tech development itself. What we are seeing is that Vietnam is also an interesting market to develop for consumer businesses or for industrial business, industrial support things. So industrial, we are seeing industrial IoT happening over there. We are seeing manufacturing industries coming up. So supporting for manufacturing and IT is a market for that. So it makes sense, let's say, after you expand to a country to tech development, it makes sense to further incorporate a company and grow your business over there. Yes. So we are also seeing a lot of investors going into Vietnam, partner startups to expand into the market itself. So if let's say you have an offshore team, it may also be advantageous because investors are always looking out for expandability of team outside of Singapore itself. A lot of investors I know, when they invest in a Singapore company, the first thing they ask is how do you expand? Where is your market? How do you expand out of Singapore? Because Singapore is just a too small market. Okay, I'm not sure, I think there's a time issue over here. So yes, if anything, you can contact us. You can take a link like this and then drop me something over there. And you can take a look at what your tech stack is now, how we can help you with tech development. And I promise SMU that I'll give you special rates for any of the services that you take with us. Okay, I'll skip this thing. There are grants available. Thank you to the Singapore government as well. If you have a Singapore incorporated company, there's always a lot of grants for you to support. Some of them are MRA grants. They support up to 70% of the cost, like 100K per company. So expansion, business development, market setup is available. There's also like EDG for innovation and productivity grant. So for companies that's expanding their product range, they need further development. It could be up to 90% on the feedback. Most of the time we see between 70 to 80% being sponsored by the government on a grant basis for product development. So if this is something that you guys are viable for, you can explore how you can take advantage of these grants for your development. With that, I end my presentation and let's go into Q&A. Hi, Denise, you are on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frank and Yusry. I think we have a few questions on Zoom, so I'll just read them out, and after that, we can open it up to the floor for people to just ask. So the first one, a lot of people have been asking me, can we have the presentation slides? So I'll talk to both of them later and we'll discuss about the slides. The second from Kevin is asking about an institution from Vietnam that you mentioned that he didn't catch. Not sure if.
Okay, let me try and get the link. UEH. It's called UEH, SMU. And
Cool. And then the third question we have is from Trung. Is there a budget estimation for offshoring for a team of 3 with 1 leader and 2 developers?
Budgeting for offshoring team of 1 developer, 1 leader, but 2.
1 leader and 2 developers.
There is a budgeting for that. I don't have it right now. If let's say anybody interested to find the budgeting, you can send over to my site. Maybe I will just do a rough one. It may not be accurate. I'll just share my screen again. So if you look at, let's say hey, somebody strong in a web developer, maybe a guy with senior 5+ years experience. So the first person, the headcount may be 3.6K USD for that. And then let's say you pair it up with 2 junior years experience. So 3.6K per month plus another 2 times 1.2, about 2.6. 2.6 plus 3.6 is about 6.2. About 6.2K per month in US would be able to suffice for one senior headcount and 2 junior headcount. 6.2K, you times 5 months is about 30+ K. 30+ K can get you.
That's a MVP, 5 to 6 months, did you say?
That is around that. That is around that. Yes.
Okay, so below 50K, I suppose, to build an MVP. It's a good range, I think.
It is a range. The thing is that a lot of time the MVP stage, what we see is that halfway through there is adding of features, and there is also finding, oh, this feature doesn't work. So they will be prepared to buffer in more. It is very common for changes to happen along the way. Yeah, so I will even buffer even 30% more just to get things done. Otherwise, you'll be very super tight timeline, super tight cost line.
Next question from Arif. From a cost effectiveness perspective, does it make more sense for the founding team to get better at technical skills, to try to hack it themselves, or just hire someone who has more experience?
Wow. Yusry, do you want to answer this question?
Okay, let me just share my experience. Because I think, to be honest, you can be adept at technical skills, but with experience, it's only with experience where you will figure out whether you are doing things right or not. So if you talk about getting adept at technical skills when you do not have any technical skills, my recommendation is don't. I think you'll be spending too much time on that. It's probably better if you can hire someone who has more experience, but if you can't afford, maybe try to find a mentor or an advisor for that. But I would say between these 2 options, probably hire someone. You may not need him or her full time at the beginning when you're still exploring your POC, but be prepared to get him or her on board on a full-time basis, say maybe when you're developing the working prototype or you're about to start your MVP, or yeah, that is my general recommendation. Of course, it varies with, I mean, I do not know what your founding team comprises, so or your level of technical expertise. So it probably may vary, but between these 2 options, just hire someone with more experience.
Yeah, let me share my perspective.
Yeah.
Arif, in your founding team itself, when the person becomes more experienced, does he, in his development, does he want to carry on doing development for the rest of the startup stage, the startup life cycle itself? If the answer is no, then it's no point. If the pain is only at the start, that you find that I cannot find developers, I'm going to save cost, therefore I learn development itself. Number one, you need to learn the basics of it. And number two, do you enjoy it? And when you grow, is it scalable for you to keep on this thing? So it's considered an investment to build up technical skills. Are you investing your time in the right area for the startup to be doing this? If let's say you are getting the CEO to do technical skills, then when the company scales, then does the CEO keep on doing development, or is he needed to be out there facing customers? I think the answer is obvious that you have to be out there facing customers. So the CEO cannot be the one coding. The COO cannot be the one coding. So you either have to be a person that is doing coding. It's going to be the CTO. But if he's at the early stage, he doesn't know development, he has to pick it up. It probably it's not enough time for him to develop. So rather than that, it's easier to outsource it to somebody to do the development. And then after that, once your team goes bigger already, and there's more budget, then you look on bringing in early employees with a good technical skill set to do this thing. Yeah, so that's more cost efficient.
I guess I also have an add-on for that. So
yes,
because you talk about the 3 stages, Yusry, you have the POC stage, the prototype stage, and the MVP stage. So in relation to that question, when do you think they should start hiring or outsourcing? So is it possible in the POC stage, for example, for them to just learn some really simple no-code tools basically to build an easy POC, or do you recommend them to actually outsource or hire a technical person as well for that stage?
Okay, so for POC stage, I think you could use some sort of no-code tools, but if there's no time to learn something, it's fine, because POC is proof of concept. Sometimes you don't actually even need a technology POC to understand whether you're doing things the right way. I have helped a client where they were going to build some sort of HR tool, but at the early stage, we figured out that the problem was that they had not really tested that process. So instead of building some fancy interface for them to get people to fill out forms, we recommended that, let's just use Google Forms. Let's collect the data and see whether we actually can make sense out of the data. So so in that case, we did a POC without any, we did not have a website, we did not have a mobile app, we just used Google Forms, and we understood, okay, we are heading the right way, we've got sufficient information, okay, then let's work on a prototype, and this time we'll make something that works. So if you are not adept at any technical skills, even in the POC stage is fine if you can do it in such a way where you don't need anything technical. Okay, but it really depends. If you are testing something that really requires something to show your potential clients, maybe you are not at POC stage, but you might be at a prototyping stage, because I feel that most POCs can be done without something technical, or you don't really need an application for that. Yeah.
Cool. We have,
in extension to this one, if there's any skill set that you want to pick up, I don't think it should be development. It should be product management. Because product management is about finding what how to prioritize, how to get the customer requirements, how to prioritize this, how to go and see what kind of timeline it is, and you manage the developers using the product management side. Yeah, and that's more important and that's more scalable in the long run. Because if you're good at product management itself, you're able to do all the right specs. You can even switch outsourcing vendors or freelancers, and it's still not a problem for you in the long run. Yeah, so I feel that that's a much more valuable skill set. And I've also reflected this to ESG to tell them you should have more courses that teach about product management.
Yeah, we did have a course on Product 101 basically, because for early stage startup founders, that is the most important thing. How do you talk to customers and translate their needs into actual requirements that you pass to your tech team? So product management, that's important. So let's go on. It's already 5, so if you have maybe about 10 more minutes, hopefully we can answer the last couple of questions. So from Maria, she sent it privately. She wants to know where she can meet developers. Is there a place or community they can join so that they can meet developers and invite them to be co-founders? If any, I guess, insights into the developer community in Singapore, and really how to convince them to join you. Because probably most of them have really good paying, well-paying jobs, right? So, I mean, one thing I think about is asking them to do it part-time on the side, basically, at the start until you raise funds, but do you guys have any other ideas on how to meet other developers?
Yusry?
Okay, I think on my side, honestly, it's not very easy. Uh, I would say if you are approaching MVP stage, you've already started building something, which maybe you have outsourced. You've identified a stack. You could attend some of the meetup.com meetings for those specific software stacks. And usually, if you're looking for a co-founder and things like that, there will be like a couple of minutes at maybe towards the end of the meetup where they will share with the audience your startup and that you are looking for technical co-founder and things like that. But specific areas where you can actually meet a potential co-founder, I think no one has really catered for that. So I'm not really in a position to share anything beyond this. Yeah.
Yeah, so I do think it's very hard. Okay, we thought of it in Vietnam, but Vietnam do not have all those meetup groups for technologies. They don't like to meet up on, so it's very hard to get that. Singapore side, they may have those meetup groups over there, but a lot of times the meetup groups, what you have is other startups trying to go and convince people inside there. So there is a fundamental lack of developers. So everybody is out there in a bloodfest trying to get developers. Convincing CTO to join you, it is really hard. I don't have a resolution. So might as well get a technical advisor at the early stage, build out your product, and that will actually also help convince the developers to come on later. When you actually show that you are not just a startup on paper, and you actually have something going on.
Okay. Next question from Anne. How to ensure that the ideas are kept confidential if they share it with an outsourcing team and freelancer? And it won't be.
Frankly speaking, this is very hard. Okay, it has happened before in China, India, even Vietnam. I have introduced some of my clients to freelancers. The freelancers, after a while, so they will say, oh, this is interesting, I want to do it. But frankly speaking, you don't have to worry too much because a lot of time it is not just about the idea, but the execution of what's important behind that. They may get a code, they may think, oh, this is very valuable. And then they deploy on the server. And what? So they don't run the business. They don't know how to run the business. They don't know how to do this thing. If your market is in Singapore, they're not in Singapore. They can't face the client over there. So a lot of time it is no point to doing that, especially if you are doing some of an execution play, right? If it's more IP related play, the question is also, do they understand the IP enough by themselves? A lot of time it's no. So for what we see, we have done some projects for universities. We make sure that we keep the IP, the core things in Singapore, in separate servers, and we just outsource the non-core things, the front-end building, the back-end building part. That's fine, because even if they can copy the front-end, back-end, they still cannot copy the core. The core is still with you, right? If you really are very concerned about this itself, so what TechJDI does is basically we have an entity in Vietnam, we sign employment agreement with them. So if anything, and with employment agreement, that's NDA as well. So we have a local entity to chase after them if anything goes wrong. The problem of freelance is that if you sign a freelance agreement with them, can you really go to the offshore country and chase them using an agreement that you signed based in Singapore side? Frankly speaking, it is hard. Yeah. So maybe finding somebody reputable offshoring company, outsourcing firm, that would be you in some of your perceived risks.
The next question from John. How do you manage churn and retention, especially in the early stages leading up to an MVP? So a team member leaving can set progress back significantly.
Good question, John. I don't know. It seems to me that you have also experienced something like that. I don't know. But churn and retention is especially hard at the early stage because there's a lot of choices for developers to go to. There's a Series A company, there's Grab in Vietnam, there's Grab. There is a lot of big companies that's hiring also. So churn is definitely an issue. So what we do, what you can do is basically at the start, finding the alignment. You need to convince them, sell them a story about how the company will grow, and they need to believe in the story to join you. So that said, you need to grow fast. so that they feel that you are a company that they can follow on with. Giving them responsibility, letting them scale fast so that they know that, oh, I'm in this team, but after 6 months, oh, the team has grown, oh, there's good progress. Then they feel that, oh, this is a company I can join in. Otherwise, you cannot retain them. They may stay with you 1 year, then in 1 year, then they'll start to think what's next already. And in fact, if they don't, their family members might. There might just be better products out there. So manage churn retention, try to be buddy with them. But at a hiring stage, make sure that they are looking for a startup. They're not looking for a corporate stable job. Excite them about what you are doing. Make sure the alignment is there. Make sure you also visit them and make them feel that they are part of the team. If you treat them like outsourcing is about money, right? Give them money, they do development. There's no loyalty over there. So that's not something sustainable in the long run. So if you want to retain them, treat them like buddies. Treat them like part of the team. Fly in over there, meet them, and then yeah, have a lot more exchange with them.
I think that's your whole slide on culture, basically, right? How do you work with the people so that we stay? Our last sharing session was with the founder of YQ, and they had an outsourced team to build their MVP and first product for them. And eventually they hired the entire outsourced team from the outsourcing company into their company after they raised funds. So
yes, that's viable.
Good idea too.
Good idea too. So I have a founder, he's a lone founder. He had a 3-man team, 4-man team in Singapore. In the end, when he go to Vietnam, he practically loved Vietnam. He stayed over there and then managed the team. In the end, he got rid of the Singapore team. He's fully in Vietnam, running the SaaS company over there. And all of them are loyal to him, even though all of them went through pay cut to stay with him. So, and that's because this guy, he's very charismatic. When he go over there, he really belong to work with the same team itself. So they feel that, wow, this is something that someone that they can follow, and therefore they follow with him. The leadership is there to make people believe in the company. So, but that is not easy to do. You need to spend a lot of time and effort to do that.
For sure. Well, any last questions from anyone? We'll give it another 3, 2, 1. If not, thank you very much, Frank and Yusry, for your sharing today. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to email us or email them, and we will get you guys connected to each other. Our next sharing session will be sometime next month with the founder of Janio, who will share more about hiring as well, how to scale from 0 to 200 people. So if you're interested, please do come and register for our sessions. Look out for the DM. And yeah, if you have no more questions, thank you so much. We will have my co-founder Donna put out a really short survey right now, like it's a Zoom poll to talk about the session. And if you're interested, we will send out a survey form sometime today and tomorrow as well. Do give us some feedback on how we can make these sessions better and more useful for everyone. Thank you very much for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.